Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Pesachim, Perek Yud, Chapter 10, Mishnah Aleph. Arvei Pesachim Samach LaMincha. On Erev Pesach, on the day before Pesach, close to Mincha time, which we'll explain what that means soon. Lo yoyechal adam ad shetachshach, a person should not eat until it gets dark. Okay? Now, this is the halacha that says that on Erev Pesach, you should not eat food that's going to fill you. You should not eat an amount of food that's going to fill you up in the afternoon. Let's call it right now, because we want to make sure that on the night of the Seder, when you eat matzah, you should eat it while you're with an appetite. If you fill yourself up with too much food before dark, and close to the end of the day, and you do that close to the end of the day, you're not going to eat matzah with an appetite. Now, in our days, by the time you sit down by the Seder and have matzah, it's who knows what time. It would seem not necessarily it wouldn't seem to be the same problem, but it is. When people eat late, it affects their appetite. But that's the halacha. You cannot eat until it gets dark. And we say, when does this point of time start? Samach lamincha, close to mincha time. Now, what that means is like this. When we talk about mincha time, there are two times. There's something called mincha gedola, the longer time for davening mincha, and mincha katana, the shorter period of time. Now, the longer period of time is at 6.5 hours into the day. That's the earliest time you can daven mincha, and that's the earliest time that the daily afternoon sacrifice, the tamar shel ben arbayim, could be brought. Okay, that's called mincha gedola. That's the longer mincha time. There was a shorter mincha time, which corresponded to the time that the afternoon daily sacrifice to Tamid was typically offered. And that's 9.5 hours into the day. Now, when we talk about hours, number one, now we're not talking about 60-minute hours. We're talking about something called sho'is zmaniyos, which we call seasonal hours, which is where you take daylight and divide it into 12 parts. Okay, that's the hours. But let's say for our sake, let's keep it around, maybe even on Pesach time, it is kind of even. It's kind of like a 12-hour day. But let's just talk about a 12-hour day for our purposes, just to make it easier. So if the day starts at 6 a.m., 9.5 hours into the day is 3:30 p.m. But the Mishna says we're talking about a time called samach lemincha, close to mincha time, around a half hour before that, which really means 9 hours into the day, which would be 3 p.m. And in halacha, very often that's called Shah Asiris, the 10th hour, because it's the beginning of the 10th hour. It's the completion of the 9th, the beginning of the 10th. But we're talking about, when we say Arvei Pesachim Samach LaMincha, and Erev Pesach close to Mincha time, we mean this half hour before Mincha Katana, this around 3 o'clock time. And that is where we say, don't eat until it's dark. Now, it doesn't mean you fast, right? It means don't eat. Don't eat what? Don't eat what's going to go ahead and take away your appetite from the matzah. Now, typically, we would be telling you not to eat bread because of that. But it's Erev Pesach in the afternoon. No bread. How about matzah?
No matzah.
No matzah, because the whole Erev Pesach can't eat matzah. So therefore, we're really talking about any other food, and we mean to say, don't eat enough of it that's going to fill you up. You could have something, when it comes to bread fills you up quicker or satisfies you quicker. While when you're talking about other foods, it takes more to be able to give you that satisfying feeling. So therefore, you have to make sure whatever it is you're eating, not to eat enough that gives you that satisfying feeling, so that it would ruin your appetite. So that's the first part of that Mishnah. Arvei Pesachim Samach LaMincha, Erev Pesach close to Mincha time. Lo yoyechal adam ad shetachshach. A person should not eat. And he should not eat an amount of food that's going to satisfy him until it gets dark. When it gets dark, then you can eat. Then you'll eat matzah. Matzah you can eat as much as you want, and that by doing this, you'll be eating the matzah with an appetite. Eating matzah with an appetite means you're eating it with enthusiasm. That actually is called the hidra mitzvah. That beautifies the mitzvah. When you do it with enthusiasm, with joy, that beautifies the mitzvah. Then when you have to push it down. So therefore, the Mishnah said, do not eat any amount that's going to satisfy, any food that an amount that's going to satisfy you until it gets dark. Now, new halacha. Va'afilu ani shebi Yisrael, even a poor man Lo yochel ad sheyasev, does not eat until he does so in a reclining fashion. Now, do not eating here doesn't mean do not eat. It should not. When do you have? Everybody has to recline. When you recline, when you drink the 4 cups of wine, when you eat the matzah, you don't have to recline with the rest of the meal. Shulchan Aruch says it's a good thing to do. That's not necessarily our practice, but the point of our Mishnah is that even a person who is poor should recline. Reclining in the times of the Mishnah was typically the act of nobility, noble people. A poor man typically at his little table did not recline. The Mishnah is saying that even a poor man who typically doesn't recline by a meal, and even if he doesn't necessarily have what it takes to typically recline, when you recline, you have a reclining couch, you have pillows. Even if he doesn't have that, he reclines on his bench or his chair. You still do the act of reclining. So again, to be acting in a certain way of nobility, because that reminds us how Hashem took us out of Egypt and made us his special nation. Next, nor shall he give him less than 4 cups of wine. You know, there's a mitzvah on the Seder night to drink 4 cups of wine. When the Mishnah here is saying that the community people who are in charge of giving out tzedakah, in charge of giving the needy what they need for Yantif, they have to make sure they cannot give him money less than being able to have 4 cups of wine. It's not only that they have to make sure he has enough money for matzah and for some food also. But the point is that these 4 cups of wine, which are a rabbinic obligation, they're not a Torah obligation, the rabbinic obligation, nonetheless, the people in charge of giving out tzedakah, giving out charity, have to make sure that he has enough to be able to buy, to have enough wine to fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 cups. And even if it means you'll have to supply him from tamchui, we translate as the charity plate. Tamchui is a source of charity that is reserved for, as they say here, the poorest of the poor. People who don't have enough money to eat 2 meals in a day. 2 meals in a day is considered in times of the Mishnah. That's your basic amount of food. We're talking about somebody who tamchui was reserved for people who are so poor they don't even have enough money for that. And when it comes to the 4 cups of wine, if it means that you'll have to dip into that fund that's reserved for the poorest of the poor to make sure that a poor man has 4 cups of wine, and that's what you got to do. So the Mishnah here kind of went into a couple of different halachas. We have the first halacha in the Mishnah of Erev Pesach, don't eat too much so as not to ruin your appetite for matzah. Everybody, including a poor man, has to recline, and everybody and the people who are in charge of the communal tzedakah have to make sure that every person, including a poor man, has enough wine to fulfill the 4 cups at the Seder. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.